Good day YouTube, welcome back to another video of the evolution of the iPod. And I'm asking you please, while you're watching this video, you know what to do. Subscribe. I'm asking you very nicely. I want to do ad revenue. So please, I want to make a living of YouTube. So please, subscribe. But let's get into this video.
Nowadays, most people listen to their music on mobile phones. But in 2001, when the iPod was announced by Steve Jobs, it changed the way people listened to music forever. Over the years, the iPod evolved significantly with all kinds of models. Even today, the 7th generation iPod Touch is still in production. Let's go through the entire evolution of this icon. This is the evolution of the iPod. Before the iPod, the only device that came close was the Sony Walkman. The Walkman was very limited due to its size and use of cassettes. On October 23, 2001, the first iPod was released, the iPod Classic. The design of the iPod Classic was entirely different from what the world had ever seen before. It was beautiful, easy to use, and truly portable. It was designed to do one thing and one thing only: play music. And it did it really well. In fact, it started a new wave of MP3 players becoming popular. One of the unique selling points of the iPod was its storage capacity. It was marketed with the slogan, 1,000 songs in your pocket.
This amazing little device holds 1,000 songs. And it goes right in my pocket.
This was truly revolutionary back then, and many people didn't mind spending $399 to buy an iPod with 5 gigabytes memory, or an extra $100 for the 10 gigabyte version that was later introduced. In 2002, the second generation iPod had an option of 20 gigabytes of storage, and it had a starting price of $299. The third generation came in 2003, and it had a new design with backlit buttons. It also came with a 30 gigabyte storage option, but the battery life was decreased by 2 hours. The fourth generation came with 2 storage options, and it had its battery significantly improved from 8 to 12 hours. In 2004, the first iPod was released with a color display known as the iPod Photo. This meant that people could play slideshows of their photos while listening to music. The battery life was also improved. However, the iPod Photo wasn't cheap, as it became available with 40 gigabytes for $499 and $599 for a 60 gigabyte model. 1 year later, in 2005, the 5th generation iPod was released. It had a slightly larger screen, which was great since it was, for the first time ever, able to watch videos. Compared to its predecessor, the battery life was decreased by 1 hour, but it did have a lower starting price of $299. The latest version of the iPod Classic was released in 2007. It featured a slightly new design with a thinner body, but more importantly, it had a dramatically improved battery life of up to 36 hours, which is more than double compared to its predecessor. It also had a lower starting price of $249 for an 80 gigabyte model. The iPod Classic had a lifespan of 12 years and was discontinued in 2014. Fun fact, before launching the iPod, Apple hired a freelancer named Vinny Chieco to figure out how to introduce the iPod to the public. Vinny saw a prototype of the iPod with its simplistic design and thought of a scene in the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Vinny suggested the name Pod, and it was accepted by others. Just like other Apple products, I was added, which stands for Internet, as well as individual, inform, instruct, and inspire. In February 2004, the iPod Mini was released. While it was in production, it was one of the most popular electronic products on the market.
And you can see the thickness right here. They're really unbelievable.
It was so popular that consumers often were unable to find a retailer with this product in stock. The iPod Mini came with a new design and a touch-sensitive scroll wheel. It was also the first iPod to be available in different colors. The Mini only had 4 gigabytes of storage, 8 hours of battery life, and a starting price of $250. The iPod Mini only lasted for 2 generations, and these were almost identical. The main difference was that the second generation had brighter colors and a much longer battery life. There was also an option for 6 gigabytes of storage, and the second generation iPod Mini was $50 cheaper than the first. The iPod Mini stayed only 1 year and 6 months in production before being replaced by the next model. Next came the iPod Nano in September 2005. The iPod Nano was more compact than its predecessor.
It's 62% smaller by volume. That means it's almost 1/3 the size.
But it only came in either black or white. The first generation had 3 storage options. The 1 gigabyte model could store around 240 songs. The 2 gigabyte model, 500 songs. And the 4 gigabyte model could store up to 1,000 songs. The iPod Nano also came with a 14-hour battery life, and with $150, it had the lowest starting price of all the iPod models so far. In September 2006 came the second generation with multiple color options.
8 gigabyte model in silver plus the 3 colors, and an 8 gigabyte model in black.
It also had a 40% brighter and more vibrant display. In addition, it had a memory capacity option of 8 gigabytes and an improved battery life of 24 hours for playing music all day long. In 2006, Apple announced a special edition of the iPod Nano, Product Red. It had a red exterior, and for every model sold, Apple donated $10 to the Product Red initiative, which supports people for global health emergencies like AIDS and COVID. The third generation was released in 2007. It came with an entirely new design with a widescreen display. 2 storage options were available while the battery and price stayed the same. 1 year later, the fourth generation became available with another design and many color options. While the display size remained the same, it had a vertical screen. A storage option of 16 gigabytes became optional. With the 5th generation Nano, the screen size was increased, and it introduced a video camera and microphone. In 2010, Apple completely changed the design of the Nano. The device featured a small 1.55-inch multi-touch screen, and it was marketed as the tiniest iPod ever. The rest of the specifications remained the same. The final model of the iPod Nano came in 2012. Apple described it as their thinnest iPod ever since it was 38% thinner than its predecessor.
Millimeters thin. Almost 40% thinner than the iPod Nano replaces. And the thinnest iPod Nano we've ever created.
It also adds the ability to use Bluetooth headsets and speakers. And it replaced the 30-pin dock connector with a Lightning connector. The 7th generation Nano came with 16 gigabytes of storage and an impressive 30-hour battery life. The iPod Nano stayed in production for more than 12 years and was discontinued in 2017. Fun fact, the 6th generation iPod Nano featured just a screen. This allowed accessory makers to produce watch bands, so it could be worn as a watch, basically making it the predecessor of the Apple Watch. Just when you thought iPods couldn't get any smaller, Apple announced the iPod Shuffle in 2005.
And it is so great to use.
According to Apple, most owners of iPod models often left their music selection on shuffle, meaning they enjoyed their songs in a random order. On the back of the iPod Shuffle, there were 3 options: shuffle mode on or off and repeat. The iPod Shuffle came with a USB connector to download songs from the computer. Since it had no display, a shorter battery life, and less storage, the iPod Shuffle was sold for just $100. Next came an even smaller model with the 2nd generation Shuffle.
A fraction of the size of the first generation. All right, it's a fraction of the size. Matter of fact, I'm going to have to make it bigger so you can see it here. Now,
it came in multiple colors, and Apple claimed it was the world's smallest MP3 player. It had 1 gigabyte of storage and was sold for $80. In 2009 came a very strange iPod Shuffle model. It didn't have volume or track buttons on the device itself. Instead, it used the buttons on the iPod earbuds. This meant that with other headphones, the volume couldn't be controlled. It had a battery life of 10 hours, 2 storage options, and it had a starting price of just $60. The latest generation iPod Shuffle was introduced in 2010. Compared to the second generation model, it had a larger control pad. The battery life was improved, and it had a starting price of $50, making it the cheapest iPod so far. Just like the iPod Nano, the iPod Shuffle stayed in production until 2017. The last and only model of the iPod that is still available right now is the iPod Touch. It was entirely different than any other iPod model. It was released in September 2007 and had a similar design of the iPhone that Apple released a few months before. Just like the iPhone, the iPod Touch came with a 3.5-inch touchscreen display with various apps. This allowed people to browse the web, watch YouTube videos, use a calculator, play games, and do all kinds of other things that weren't possible on an iPod before. The first generation had 2 storage options of 8 and 16 gigabytes, a 22-hour music playback battery life, and a starting price of $300. The second generation came with a new design and featured volume buttons.
We've integrated volume controls into the side. We think that's going to make a lot of people a little happier.
There was also a 32-gigabyte storage option available, and the battery life was significantly improved while it came at a lower starting price. In 2009 came the third generation iPod Touch. It came at a higher starting price, but it did have more storage. The fourth generation came with an entirely different design, similar to that of the iPhone 4. It introduced a front and rear camera, as well as a Retina display. It also used the new Apple A4 chip, making it much faster. The battery life was improved, and it had a base price of $230. The fifth generation iPod Touch, released in 2012, came in multiple colors. The screen was increased to a 4-inch display, and it used a lightning connector for faster charging. The specs were almost similar to its predecessor, and it had a starting price of $300. After 2.5 years, the sixth generation iPod Touch was introduced. It came in colors not seen on an iPod before, and the rear camera was improved to 8 megapixels. A storage option of 128 gigabytes became available, and it had a starting price of $100 less than its predecessor. And finally, the latest iPod Touch that is still in production today is the 7th generation iPod Touch, released in 2019. It comes with an A10 Fusion processor that is much faster and more advanced than any of the previous iPods. For the first time, a 256-gigabyte storage option is available, and it has a starting price of $200. Fun fact, the iPod Touch with all its generations are a massive success. In total, over 100 million iPod Touch units have been sold.
Whoa.
Even though the iPod Touch is still available today, it is not nearly as popular as it used to be. It was developed to be a revolutionary music player, and it did really well. But the introduction of the iPhone and other smartphones led to the downfall of the iPod. In fact, when the iPhone was first announced, it was called an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator.
A widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
I would highly recommend watching the evolution of the iPhone next if you haven't seen it already. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I will react to the iPhone evolution soon. But thanks for watching. And you know what to do. Subscribe. And subscribe to Flat Life. Because that is where I got this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.